My uncle laughed at me during dinner, saying, "No offense, but no one really expects you to succeed. You're more of a charity case." The whole table laughed. Even my parents. I didn't flinch. Just raised my glass and toasted, to the underdog. Last month, I bought the company he works for. A week ago, I fired him. He's been outside my building every morning since, begging for his job back. I come from what you might call old money adjacent, not quite aristocracy, but a family that's been comfortable for generations. My father runs a moderately successful investment firm that my grandfather started. My mother comes from a similar background. Our extended family includes doctors, lawyers, executives. You get the picture. And then there's me. From an early age, I was different. While my cousins were joining debate teams and playing lacrosse, I was tinkering with computers in my room. While they were getting straight A's and interviewing for Ivy League schools, I was building websites for local businesses and teaching myself programming languages. My grades weren't bad, but they weren't exceptional either. I was more interested in practical applications than theoretical excellence. My parents tried to hide their disappointment, but it showed. Especially at family gatherings, where my accomplishments always seemed to pale in comparison to my cousins' achievements. The dinner in question happened 10 years ago. I was 22, fresh out of a state college with a degree in computer science, not Harvard Business School like my father had hoped. I had just launched my first real startup with a friend from college. We had developed a new algorithm for inventory management that we thought could revolutionize small to mid-sized businesses. We had secured a tiny amount of seed funding, enough to rent a small office space and pay ourselves poverty wages. I was excited about it. For the first time, I felt like I was building something that was truly mine, not following the path that had been laid out for me. The dinner was at my parents' house, a monthly tradition where the extended family gathered to catch up. My uncle Richard, my father's younger brother and a senior VP at Nolan Industries, a mid-sized tech conglomerate, always dominated these events. He was loud, brash, and considered himself the family's business guru. I hadn't planned to talk about my startup that night. But my mother, in what I think was a genuine attempt to include me in the conversation, brought it up. "James has started his own company," she said, during a lull in the conversation about my cousin's summer internship at a prestigious law firm. All eyes turned to me. I felt a familiar sense of scrutiny. "It's just a small startup," I said, trying to sound humble but confident. "We've developed an inventory management algorithm that helps businesses predict demand and optimize their supply chain." "How interesting," my aunt said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. My father cleared his throat. "It's a learning experience," he said. "James is getting some real-world business experience before he applies to MBA programs." I hadn't told him I was applying to MBA programs, because I wasn't. But I let it slide. Uncle Richard took a sip of his wine and looked at me with a smirk. "So you're what, selling software to mom-and-pop shops?" "For now," I said. "But we believe the application has potential for larger enterprises as well. We're focusing on proving the concept with smaller businesses first." He chuckled, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard to me. "No offense, James, but no one really expects you to succeed. You're more of a charity case. The family black sheep who we all root for but don't actually expect anything from." The table went quiet. And then my cousin snickered. Then my aunt. And then, to my surprise and heartbreak, my father gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. My mother smiled awkwardly. The table erupted in gentle laughter. 10 years later, I can still feel the heat that rushed to my face in that moment. The shame. The anger. The humiliation. But externally, I didn't flinch. I had spent too many family dinners being the butt of subtle jokes to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I raised my glass. "To the underdog," I said, and took a drink. The conversation moved on. No one asked anything more about my business. No one seemed to think it was worth discussing. That night changed something in me. It wasn't that I suddenly developed a burning desire for revenge, it was more that I realized I had nothing to lose. My family's approval was already lost to me. Their expectations were so low that I could only exceed them. I threw myself into my work with a new intensity. And what began as a desire to prove myself evolved into something else entirely, a genuine passion for building something meaningful. My co-founder Alex and I worked 18-hour days. We lived on ramen and coffee. We pitched to every investor who would listen. We got rejected hundreds of times. But our early clients, those mom-and-pop shops that Uncle Richard had dismissed, were seeing real results from our software. Word began to spread. 6 months after that fateful dinner, we secured our first significant investment, $500,000 from a small venture capital firm that specialized in B2B software. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to hire 2 more developers and a salesperson. I didn't tell my family about this development. In fact, I had started attending the monthly dinners less frequently, citing work commitments. When I did attend, I kept conversation about my business to a minimum. Let them think I was failing. Let them keep their low expectations. Over the next 2 years, our company, which we called Supply AI, grew steadily. We expanded our client base from local businesses to regional chains. We refined our algorithm and expanded our offering to include not just inventory management but comprehensive supply chain optimization. By year 3, we had 40 employees and had moved into a real office space in the downtown area. We were profitable, not wildly so, but enough to reinvest in growth. It was around this time that Nolan Industries, where Uncle Richard worked, started developing a similar product. I learned this not from my uncle, who still treated me with condescending amusement at family gatherings, but from industry news. Nolan was a much larger company with far more resources, and they were targeting the same mid-sized business market that we had moved into. This should have worried me, but it didn't. Because I knew something they didn't: our algorithm was better. Much better. We had spent 3 years refining it, testing it with real businesses, adapting it to different industries. Nolan was starting from scratch, trying to play catch-up. Still, they had the advantage of size and reputation. They could undercut our prices and leverage existing client relationships. Competition became fierce. Uncle Richard finally seemed to realize that my little project was actually a legitimate business when Supply AI was mentioned in the same industry publication as Nolan's new offering. At the next family dinner, he approached me with a different kind of smirk. "Looks like you've managed to keep that little operation of yours afloat," he said. "Though I'd consider selling soon if I were you. Once Nolan's supply chain solution hits the market at scale, you'll be squeezed out." "Thanks for the advice," I said, taking a sip of my wine. "Always appreciated." He patted me on the shoulder. "No hard feelings about the competition, right? It's just business." I smiled. "Of course. Just business." What Uncle Richard didn't know was that we had just closed a Series B funding round of $12 million, valuing Supply AI at $60 million. We were using that money to expand into international markets and develop new AI capabilities that would leave Nolan's solution in the dust. By year 5, Supply AI had over 200 employees and offices in 3 countries. We had expanded beyond retail into manufacturing, healthcare, and logistics. Our revenue had crossed $50 million annually, with healthy profit margins. Nolan's competing product, meanwhile, had stalled. Their solution was adequate but not exceptional. They had captured some market share through aggressive pricing, but they weren't innovating at our pace. At family gatherings, I now detected a new tone when relatives asked about my business. There was genuine curiosity, perhaps even a hint of respect. My father had stopped talking about MBA programs and had started asking more detailed questions about our technology. Uncle Richard, however, maintained his dismissive attitude, though it now seemed forced. "Impressive little run you're having," he would say. "Enjoy it while it lasts. The big fish always eat the little fish eventually." I would just smile and change the subject. In year 7, we faced a crucial decision. We had grown to the point where we needed either a massive capital injection to fund the next phase of our growth or a strategic acquisition by a larger company that could provide resources and market access. We had offers from several major tech companies. The valuations were impressive, north of $500 million. Most founders in my position would have taken one of these offers, cashed out, and moved on to the next venture. But I wasn't most founders. I had a different vision. I turned down all acquisition offers and instead went for a larger funding round, raising $100 million at a $700 million valuation. I used this money not just to expand our core business but to begin a series of strategic acquisitions of our own. We bought a data analytics company that enhanced our prediction capabilities. We acquired a logistics software firm that complemented our supply chain offering. We purchased a small AI research lab that was developing cutting-edge machine learning techniques. With each acquisition, we grew stronger, more diversified, more innovative. Our annual revenue crossed $200 million in year 8. And still, at family gatherings, Uncle Richard would find ways to minimize my success. "Raising all that venture capital is just building a house of cards," he'd say. "Real businesses don't need to keep diluting their equity." I would nod thoughtfully, as if considering his wisdom, while in reality, I was executing a plan that was beyond his comprehension. In year 9, we made our boldest move yet. We went public. Our IPO was oversubscribed, and the stock popped 40% on the first day of trading. Supply AI was now valued at over $3 billion. I retained 25% of the company, making me, on paper at least, a billionaire. The family dinner following our IPO was interesting. There was no more hiding or minimizing my success. The local paper had run a front-page story. My parents' friends had called to congratulate them on their son's achievement. My father gave a toast that night. "To James," he said, raising his glass. "Who has made us all proud." I nodded in acknowledgement, but I didn't miss the way Uncle Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. After dinner, he cornered me on the patio. "Congratulations," he said, swirling his scotch. "Though I have to say, going public was a risky move. Now you've got shareholders to answer to, quarterly earnings to worry about. It's a different game." "You're right," I said. "It is a different game. But I've always been a quick learner." He chuckled. "Well, don't get too comfortable. The tech market is volatile. Today's unicorn is tomorrow's cautionary tale." I just smiled. What Uncle Richard didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that I had already set in motion the final phase of my plan. For years, I had been watching Nolan Industries closely. Not just their supply chain division, which competed with us, but the entire company. I had studied their financials, their management, their strengths and weaknesses. I knew the company almost as well as its own executives did. Nolan was a solid business with decent margins and a strong market position in several B2B tech niches. But it had problems too. Their innovation had stalled. Their leadership was aging and risk-averse. They had missed several emerging market trends. Their stock had underperformed the broader tech index for 3 consecutive years. In the months following our IPO, I had quietly begun accumulating Nolan stock through various investment vehicles. It wasn't a hostile takeover attempt, yet. Just a strategic investment in an undervalued company in our sector, as I explained it to our board. 6 months after our IPO, I made my move. Supply AI announced a tender offer for Nolan Industries at a 30% premium to its current stock price. The business press was shocked. The smaller, newer company trying to swallow the established industry player? It was unheard of. Nolan's board initially rejected the offer, as I expected they would. So we raised our bid by another 10%. At the same time, I launched a charm offensive, meeting with major Nolan shareholders to explain the strategic rationale for the merger and the value it would create. Crucially, I positioned the acquisition not as a takeover but as a merger of equals that would leverage the best of both companies. The only detail I insisted on was that I would be CEO of the combined entity. The shareholder pressure worked. 3 months and one more price bump later, Nolan's board capitulated. The deal was announced on a Monday morning before market open. I learned later that Uncle Richard had been blindsided by the news. He had been on vacation in the Bahamas and returned to find his company had agreed to be acquired by his nephew's charity case startup. The family dinner that month was particularly sweet. Uncle Richard didn't attend, he was under the weather, according to my aunt. I expressed my sincere regrets about his absence. The merger took 6 months to complete. During that time, I made no decisions about personnel at Nolan. I wanted everything to appear business as usual. I spoke of synergies and complementary strengths in all my communications with Nolan employees. Uncle Richard remained in his position as SVP during this period. We had one brief, awkward meeting where I assured him that I valued his experience and institutional knowledge. He nodded stiffly and said he looked forward to working together. I don't think he believed me, but what choice did he have? The day the merger was finalized, I called an all-hands meeting for the combined company. I outlined my vision for the future, emphasizing innovation, agility, and customer focus. I announced a new organizational structure that would break down silos and foster collaboration. And buried in the middle of these changes was the elimination of an entire layer of senior management, including, of course, Uncle Richard's position. I didn't fire him personally. That would have been too obvious, too petty. Instead, he received the news from HR, just like 20 other executives whose roles had been made redundant in the new structure. His severance package was generous: 6 months' salary, extended benefits, outplacement services. Everything by the book. Nothing that could be construed as vindictive. But we both knew what it was. The next family dinner was tense. Uncle Richard showed up, surprisingly. He was subdued, nursing a single glass of scotch all evening. My parents and other relatives made awkward small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of business. As the evening was winding down, Uncle Richard approached me in the hallway. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. "Spending 10 years of your life just to get back at me for one comment at a dinner?" I looked at him steadily. "This may come as a shock to you, Richard, but not everything is about you. I built Supply AI because I believed in what we were creating. The fact that it put me in a position to acquire Nolan was just serendipitous." He snorted. "Bull crap. You could have taken any of those acquisition offers you had. You could have merged with a dozen other companies. You specifically targeted Nolan because of me." I shrugged. "If thinking that gives your unemployment some cosmic significance, feel free." His face flushed. "I've got 40 years of experience in this industry. I've forgotten more about supply chain management than you'll ever know. Firing me was a mistake." "Perhaps," I said. "But it's my mistake to make." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. "I need that job, James," he said, his voice lower, almost desperate. "The severance will run out. I'm 57, who's going to hire me at this level? Diana and I just bought the lake house. Ben is still in college. I can't afford to retire yet." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I removed his hand from my arm. "You should have thought about that before you decided I was nothing but a charity case." The next morning, I arrived at the office at my usual time, 7:30 a.m. And there he was, standing by the entrance. Uncle Richard, in a suit that suddenly seemed a size too large, holding a leather portfolio. "James," he said, stepping forward. "I was hoping to catch you before you went in." I stopped. "Richard. This is inappropriate. If you have concerns about your severance package, you should contact HR." "I'm not here about the severance," he said. "I'm here about my job. I've put together a proposal for a new role, Senior Advisor on Supply Chain Strategy. I'd report directly to you, helping to integrate Nolan's existing clients and systems with Supply AI's technology. It makes sense, James. You know it does." I looked at him for a long moment. The man who had laughed at my dreams. Who had dismissed my hard work. Who had never, not once, shown genuine interest or belief in what I was building. "Email your proposal to HR," I said finally. "They'll review it along with any other applications we receive." His face fell. "Come on, James. This isn't about qualifications. This is personal, and we both know it. All I'm asking for is a chance." "Like the chance you gave me?" I asked quietly. "The encouragement? The support? The belief that I could be more than just the family disappointment? He had the grace to look ashamed. That was 10 years ago. People change. I've changed. Have you? I asked. Or have circumstances changed? Would you be standing here, humbling yourself, if our positions were reversed? If I was the one who needed a job from you? He didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said, and walked past him into the building. The next day, he was there again. And the day after that. For a week straight, Uncle Richard stationed himself outside my office building, trying to catch me coming or going. Sometimes with new proposals, sometimes with appeals to family loyalty, sometimes with thinly veiled threats about telling the board about my personal vendetta. I instructed security to let him be as long as he didn't try to enter the building or harass employees. I didn't want to create a scene that might generate gossip or, worse, press coverage. On the 8th day, I arrived to find him looking particularly haggard. The confident, smirking man who had dismissed me so casually at that dinner a decade ago was gone. In his place was someone desperate, diminished. "James," he said, falling into step beside me. "Please. Just 5 minutes of your time." I stopped. "You have to." He swallowed. "I was wrong about you. I've been wrong about you for years. You're not a charity case. You're not the family disappointment. You're the most successful person in our entire extended family, and I was too blind by my own ego to see your potential." I waited. "I'm sorry," he continued. "For what I said that night. For how I've treated you. For not recognizing what you were building. I was jealous, if I'm honest. Jealous that you were doing something innovative while I was just maintaining the status quo at Nolan." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I asked. "That you weren't just dismissive, but actively resentful of my success?" He shook his head. "No, it's supposed to show you that I understand what I did wrong. That I recognize my failures. That I'm capable of change." He took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to give me back my old job. I don't even expect you to create a new one for me. But I'm asking you, as your uncle, as family, to help me find something. A reference. An introduction. Anything." I looked at him for a long moment. The anger that had driven me for so long seemed to have faded, leaving behind something more complex. Not forgiveness, exactly. But perhaps the beginning of closure. "I'll have HR send over some contacts at firms in our network," I said finally. "Beyond that, you're on your own." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you, James." I held up a hand to stop him. "Don't thank me. We're not friends. We're barely family at this point. I'm doing this because continuing to watch you beg outside my building every morning is becoming tedious." His relief dimmed, but he nodded. "I understand." I turned to go, then paused. "One more thing, Richard." "Yes?" I looked him in the eye. "The next time you're tempted to dismiss someone's dreams or mock their ambitions, remember this week. Remember how it feels to be on the other side of that equation." With that, I walked into the building, leaving Uncle Richard standing alone on the sidewalk. That evening, I poured myself a glass of scotch in my penthouse apartment and looked out over the city lights. I thought about that dinner 10 years ago. The laughter. The humiliation. The toast. "To the underdog," I whispered, raising my glass to my reflection in the window. Sometimes, the underdog wins. It's been a month since I last saw Uncle Richard outside my building. True to my word, I had HR send him some industry contacts. I heard through the family grapevine that he found a position at a consulting firm, less prestigious than his role at Nolan, with a significant pay cut, but employment nonetheless. At the most recent family dinner, there was an empty chair where he usually sat. My aunt came alone, explaining that Richard had prior commitments. No one pressed for details. As I drove home that night, I found myself wondering if the revenge had been worth it. Had I spent a decade building a multi-billion-dollar company just to fire one man who had laughed at me at a dinner? No. I built Supply AI because I believed in what we were creating. Because I saw a need in the market that wasn't being met. Because I found purpose and meaning in the work itself. The fact that it also gave me the opportunity to prove Uncle Richard wrong, to transform from the family disappointment to the family success story, was just a side benefit. A particularly sweet one, but a side benefit nonetheless. And yet, as I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't help but feel that the story wasn't quite finished. That there was one more move to make. The next morning, I called Uncle Richard. "James?" He answered, surprise evident in his voice. "I've been thinking," I said, without preamble. "About what you said regarding Nolan's clients and systems integration. You were right, we could use someone with your institutional knowledge during this transition period." There was a long pause. "Are you offering me a job?" "A 6-month contract position," I clarified. "As an integration consultant. After that, we can evaluate whether there's a need for a permanent role." Another pause. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why now, after everything?" I considered how to answer. "Because holding on to anger is exhausting," I said eventually. "Because I've made my point. And because, despite everything, you do know Nolan's systems better than anyone." "And the salary?" "Market rate for a consultant with your experience. HR will send over the details." He cleared his throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do the job well," I replied. "Say you'll approach it with humility. Say you understand that this isn't forgiveness, it's a business decision. I understand, he said quietly. And? Thank you. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. I wasn't sure if I'd made the right decision. Maybe I was being naive. Maybe Uncle Richard hadn't changed at all. But I had. The angry young man, desperate to prove himself, had grown into someone secure enough in his own success that he didn't need to keep others down to feel elevated. The truth is, revenge isn't as satisfying as they make it out to be in movies. It doesn't bring closure. It doesn't heal old wounds. It just creates new ones. Real victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so magnificent that their opinions become irrelevant. 10 years ago, I raised a glass and toasted to the underdog. Today, I'm no longer the underdog. But I'll always remember what it felt like to be one. And perhaps that's the most important victory of all. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the awards and comments. A lot of you are asking if this is real. Yes, it is, though I've changed names and some details for privacy reasons. Some of you think I was too soft in the end by giving him a contract position. Maybe. But life's too short to hold grudges forever, and besides, having him work under me after all these years is its own kind of sweet justice. Edit 2. To clarify some questions in the comments, yes, I did build a billion-dollar company partly motivated by spite. No, I don't recommend this as a business plan. But hey, sometimes spite is a powerful motivator when all else fails. Edit 3. For those asking about my parents, our relationship is complicated. They've apologized for not believing in me, and we're working on rebuilding trust. As for the rest of the family, it's amazing how quickly attitudes change when you have money. Funny how that works. Final edit. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Remember, success is the best revenge, but forgiveness is the best success. Or something like that. I'm not a philosopher, just a guy who got lucky and worked hard. And maybe held a grudge for a little too long.